Everybody's ready and duly fortified with food. Let's go ahead and get started. It's really great to see people in person, realize we exist in 3 dimensions and not just screen images. I don't think we're avatars. I think we're actually human beings here tonight. And hopefully we'll be able to keep doing this and we won't have any great, another round of virus that we can't deal with. But I understand everybody's being careful. And we do have a number of the panel who are watching the live streaming as well. First of all, I want to welcome the members of the KUB board and staff who are here tonight. And in attendance from the Board of Commissioners, we've got Kathy Hamilton, there's Kathy, and Celeste Herbert, Celeste, and John Worden, John. And members of the KUB senior staff, y'all know Gabe Bolus, and Susan Edwards, Erwin Haygood, Tiffany Martin, Mark Walker, there's Mark, and John Williams. So thank you, John. We have a recent change in KUB senior staff that I'd like to let everybody know about. Eddie Black, Eddie you've known for a very long time, Senior Vice President, Chief Technology Officer, retired this week after 42 years of service. So I take it he got all the gold stars and retirement benefits and so forth, so appertaining. Jamie Davis, you know from Broadband, and Jamie has worked very hard with us on that, is going to be a new member of KUB's senior staff and is now serving as Vice President of Fiber Deployment and Chief Technology Officer. So Jamie, congratulations. You're familiar with Elba Marshall. Elba, who's going to be with us this evening, helping out. I did mention we're live streaming this, so it's important that when you speak, you push the microphone button to green, and then when you're done, you can switch it back to red. And then I'll add, right now, I think everything is working okay, especially for those who are watching on live stream, but we're experiencing some technical challenges. We don't think it's Russians trying to, commandeer the system, but, I think there's something we'll be able to work with. Courtney Rourke of KUB's Communications Department is going to be taking a few photos during our meeting. First time we've been able to get together in person. We want to commemorate that. Okay, y'all had the minutes. Does anybody have any changes they'd like to suggest to those from our last meeting? Okay. So what we're going to do tonight is discuss the panel survey and agenda planning and then have a broadband discussion. It's time to turn the decisions over to you as to what we talk about and what the topics are. Y'all had a chance to participate in a survey, which is going to help provide input on the kind of topics that we take up and when, and what priorities we give to those topics. We also have those highlights of those will be available tonight to talk about. Secondly, though that's going to be the main challenge we have tonight, we have a secondary part of the program that's very important, and that is an update on broadband. As you know, the primary purpose is this group is to provide input to KUB on major policies. You asked to be updated on plans related to broadband. Vice Mayor McKenzie commented during the City Council meeting that you'd like to have the benefit of input from this group on broadband. So with that in mind, you're going to be hearing tonight from Jamie, after we have our panel discussion, an update on all the things that have been happening. We're moving quickly on broadband and what the decision points are ahead that we'll be able to engage. So you'll be hearing how we got to where we are and what the next steps are. So if that's okay, let's go ahead and, let's also talk about the tour. Everybody wanted to take part in the tour or favorably inclined to the tour. Most prefer weekday, and the tour length would be no more than 4 hours seems to be preferred. So we'll be moving to arrange those as we go along. Okay, so what we've got here is the survey results, and you can see there was reasonable interest in all of these topics. Water leak detection, biosolids, economic development, water supply master plan, community relations, customer communications, wastewater bills, workforce diversity, but there was particular interest in 4. And those were the relationship with TVA, that has come up a couple of times, and there's clear interest in that. Water quality, the design of rates, the rate system, rate structure design, and alternative energy. So we can use this as the basis by which we engage in our discussion tonight. We also got some open-ended responses beyond the survey that people made. Broadband, low-income customer support, service reliability and peak demand management, natural gas emissions management, renewable energy, rate schedules and design. Now, some of those do overlap with the topics that were in the firm part of the survey before the open-ended and the closed-ended. So right now we're going to determine the tour date, and we have scheduled meetings in October and December. We had gone to every other month following our last meeting and following the broadband discussion. So one of the questions, and we don't have to answer this right now, or we could talk about it, is how often the panel would desire to meet. So how would you like to proceed? Now this is going to be a panel-driven discussion of which topics we talk about next. So for October, we could talk about October and December's meetings, which you'd prefer. I'm assuming we might want to work from the 4 topics that got the most input, but I don't think anybody's wed to that. And then also in that discussion, we can talk about how often we'd want to meet. So who'd like to start off with their desire is where we ought to go next and what topics we need to get into? Dr. Smith.
Yeah, so thank you, Bill, and I'm excited that we're moving into this section, and I appreciate all that KUB has done to get everybody level set, but this is what I really think the advisory committee is all about. It would be my desire, and I think as we look at some of these issues, there are some issues that are fairly complex, and I think it is important that the information that is presented in a broad and probably coming from different perspectives, because some of these topics I think can be very different perspectives, and so it would be my hope that we would be able to allow outside presenters to come in potentially and educate us as advisory committees, or if there are members of the advisory committee that actually have particular knowledge on particular topics to potentially present. I think that one of the preferred topics on rate design is particularly thorny, and probably there's a lot of issues nested in there, because I saw, the issues around low income, bill pay, and other things like that. And I know that there's been some work done by the community, some community groups, to put a spotlight on some of these things. And so it would be my hope that we try to bring this information forward and present it, let the advisory committee chew on it, and then maybe bring some additional information. If you go too far between meetings, I think you may lose a little bit of the focus, particularly if you're hot on a topic. And so it may be that we want to meet, maybe 2 months together on a particular topic, if it's thorny, and then maybe take a month off and then transition to another topic area, as opposed to going longer.
Right.
That's just a suggestion. And again, I have some ideas on some of these macro topics and sort of how they could be presented. But I do believe that it may take more than one meeting to digest some of this. Let us assimilate it, maybe come back with some follow-up questions and stuff that are presented in the second meeting. And I think keeping those aggregated close together would make the flow and continuity of the discussion better.
Okay, let me speak to a couple of those and then let's open it up. I think the last thing you said, I think makes a lot of sense, and I think we may want to choose topic order, but not necessarily the dates, because and allow for the first topic to go on to another meeting. I think, you know, not constrain it to one. I think that gets at what you're talking about, and I think that would be important. Just as a prerogative of the chair, I think, you know, in talking about, we had really tried to keep this group itself participating rather than have open up to presentations other than a public forum. However, I don't think there's anything wrong with a member of the panel taking that information and presenting that to others from, you know, after dealing with other groups that have things they would want to present, just to make sure everything got in front of us. But, you know, I think once we start opening ourselves up to presentations from various groups, I think that can get a little beyond. I mean, we're the representative groups to chew on the representative of various areas to chew on these topics. I think the point is, though, we want to make sure those ideas get in here unfiltered. I think that is the key. So why don't we put that aside for a moment, and any of the rest of you have any, or anyway, that's my reaction to that. Do any of y'all have any, yes, Dr. Scheid?
I think that what we need to do is, I like the idea of meeting every other month, because that gives us time as representatives of the community to take back the information that we learn and garner information from the community and bring back what has been discussed. I do believe we're going to talk about topics. The main thing that we've got to get to right off the bottom line is rate design. So my belief is that we meet every other month. I don't think we need to bring any other groups in. Those groups can come to us. We get the information. We can present to the group. But I do think that right from the beginning, we need to deal with rates.
So we've got a nomination of a topic that we start with rate design first. Concur? Yes, Kent?
Yeah, I totally concur. I think
Okay.
That's a great idea. I'd love to do that. One thing I had imagined when we talked about this, by the way, who's online among the panelists? There's some panelists who are watching us, but we're not watching them.
It's just being live streamed.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, I thought other panelists were participating.
They're
couldn't
able
come
to
in person.
watch, but
What?
and some of the panelists are able to watch along with
Okay,
others
great.
live
Well,
streaming.
okay,
but they're
good.
we're not set up
Well-
quite yet for them to participate through.
Okay, great.
the process.
Well, the thing that I had imagined was that different panelists could take different topics and curate the presentation. That means that if a panelist were presenting about rates, whoever we decide that would be, they could also bring in an outsider that could zoom in on a screen and talk about a different rate structure somewhere else, or what other people do, or how one handles changing rates in relationship to regulatory authority, various issues like that, that we might not have expertise on, but we might be able to find it. So that way, we community members would be able to set and present the agenda, but we wouldn't be limited to just dealing with stuff that we have experts on. I mean, we're representatives of the community, but utilities are complicated things, and
Right.
so we might need outside expertise
I think-
and reports to present.
I am going to push back on that in the sense that then we get into the universe of possible perspectives that we would have to be open to if we wanted to go down that route. And I think, and we've had, having requests for various groups to make presentations. To me, that, given the kind of the ground rules we set up, I think it would work better if during the time a panel member got with and the group they could even help prepare points, brought those in. There would be nothing to prevent the members of some group from being in attendance, But I think turning over the, once we started saying, well, I would like to bring this group, there could be a series of alternative groups, and it'd change the character of this. I mean, we're here. We're not all total subject matter experts, but we're here with backgrounds and perspectives that are very varied. And I think it would work better as a panel to have the panel be in charge of the presentations rather than started opening it up. I think that would.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Right.
I haven't made myself clear. I want the panel to be in
Okay.
charge of the presentation.
Right.
I don't want outside groups to come in and propagandize from
Right.
which I think is
Right.
what you're
That's
feeling.
what I'm saying,
I
yeah.
agree with you on that.
Okay.
But it didn't seem to me that it would be harmful to have somebody who's written a paper on rate design. One thing I was thinking of is when we talked about alternative energy, have someone from the National Renewable Energy Lab. They've done a big report with Los Angeles Department of Water and Power about how you actually get there. And I think it would be informative without being like some group's propaganda message.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. Aaron?
I think a couple things have resonated with me so far. First is Dr. Scheib, you mentioned this idea of having some time between meetings. I think it's good because what I'm hearing you say, Kent, is that there could be some really meaty topics where one discussion creates a lot of questions that we have, even just that day, and that there is probably some pretty significant preparation time that either comes from members of our panel who say, hey, let me take that, I'll go research it and report back, or to the KUB staff. And so, to me, this idea of rate design being such a hot topic of interest and one that truly, I think, could take us past December because it's so foundational to KUB decision-making. To me, that would be an appropriate way of saying, what are our questions, and making sure that our responsibility as panelists is to document that so that we can then discuss, well, how can we report back on that information, and whether that's something we take on or whether that's something KUB can help us digest, because they do know this inside and out.
Right. And in this case, I think we will want to take advantage of KUB staff who have a lot of expertise, but also be open to, one way or the other, to getting varied other perspectives in on any of these topics, which there are many. So let's, yes, Stephen.
Knowing just enough about rate design to be dangerous, it is a really tricky topic. I know from our work, we have members of our staff that are quite adept at it. And then, some of that stuff can be communicated. If, again, I think it should be up to the panel whether they want to let somebody present or not, as opposed to that being shut down from the top. But I do believe that at a minimum, we should be able to allow subject matter experts to be in attendance so that if an issue comes up, they are able to be called upon to answer specific questions. Otherwise, we are then being held biased only to KUB's perspective on things, and we're not able to, in real time, have a dialogue. And I don't think that that's going to lead there's ways that you can shape conversations that can either be effective or they can be limited.
Right.
And again, I think we should decide whether we want to be able to have somebody present to us or not. But if that's going to get truncated or shut down, I strongly feel that we need to be able to have those people in the room to be able to engage in meaningful dialogue in real time, because as information is being exchanged, there will be questions that come up. There will be subtleties that need to be clarified, and I think there needs to be the ability to have that dealt with from multiple perspectives.
Okay. I think there are a variety of ways, I'll respond and throw it open. I think there are a variety of ways we can ensure, including what you just suggested, that we can ensure that this is an informed discussion. And it may be we have, let's say, if we go with, we need more time in between to speak with people, to take information back, to receive information from the public or from interested groups or experts of various kinds, and bring it back, that there's nothing to prevent the a report to be prepared and filed with the panel, and possibly then have people here if folks want to ask about it as a supplement. So how do some of the rest of y'all feel about this? You say, I think we very much changed the chemistry of what this group is all about if we have it be a series of, no matter what side we're on, a series of interests that come in. There are multiple interests, and we have to sort through all of these. I don't think that's what we're really about. But we do want to get all the topics fairly articulated and discussed before everybody. And there's got to be a sweet spot we can use, and maybe we're touching on some of those ways now. Anybody else have a thought on that?
Usually would be an open meeting, though, correct? Open to the public?
It's an open meeting, yes.
So other people could be invited to be there, and then would there be an opportunity for public comment?
Yes, and I think what you're getting at is even beyond the public comment, if somebody has a question or a comment or wants something to be expanded on, to be able to call on somebody,
Right.
at the very least, yeah.
Yeah, and I think if we do bring forth information that we may have information on, but a question comes up to us that we're unable to answer, but somebody is available that
Right.
could answer that or embellish on it. I mean, obviously KUB will have a perspective on it, and I think but there may be some areas, and let me just caution, I think we need to spend some time on exactly what we mean by rate design and where we're going there, because you have all kinds of rate classes, you've got all kinds of elements within rate design, you've got, what is it that we're actually trying to get at, because
Right.
either we need to set up a subcommittee that works with you in between the next meeting that actually begins to define that, because I don't know that that's something that's just thrown out there broadly. Each of us may have our own sort of unique approach to what we want to learn out of rate design, and I think that's got to be clarified, because that's just
Yeah,
opening
you're
a
right.
whole
It's
can of worms.
it's a big giant umbrella
It is
right
a
now.
big topic.
So how should we do seem to have consensus we want to start with rate design. Yes, Mr. Dixon.
Let's go back to your question that's up on the board. How often do we want to meet? That's the question you have up there. And then Dr. Scheidt brought up, I guess, every other month. Dr. Smith brought up every month, or take a break, 2 months. How often do we want to meet? I think we need to answer that question first. And then we talked about it being the first topic would be design, rate design. So how often do we want to meet? Can we answer that question first?
I think that'd be a great place to start.
Yeah, first.
All right, we've had a suggestion for at least open to every month, if not every month, and every other month, to give us time to get back to the community and hear and bring things back to the panel. Any further thoughts on what would be best, every month or 2 months?
Bill, can I complicate it even more?
Sure.
Is it possible that if we're going to, I want to support, Dr. Seip's suggestion, if we're going to take time in between, that there might be some subcommittee or some way that some of the members can actually work on some of the issues between meetings and then present information. I mean, I think there may be topics that may require some dialogue in between meetings that then sharpen the topic that is then presented to the larger group. If you go every other month, that's 8 weeks, and I mean, yes, you can go back and check in with some folks, but I have a feeling there's going to be some homework that we need to do to clarify some things.
One of the things that I've been thinking about this cadence is almost like a content committee, or maybe I forget who mentioned it, but some kind of group that helps advise KUB and does do some of that in between pre-work to help make sure that if we're only meeting every 2 months, those 2-month meetings are super productive. And that, we get through some of that, questions or, other things. And so if there's a way that for those who are willing to engage on that monthly level, that they are actually in a role to help advise what those 2-month meetings become.
Well, there's,
knowing that,
yes, and there's
capacity's
going to have to be one way or the other, and I think maybe it involves some KUB staff person, interested members on the topic from the panel, to work on what it is that's going to be the basis of a conversation. I mean, we have to have some information there to discuss, or some points, or some topics with some background, and then some other alternative perspectives on how to approach that. Yeah, Tim?
I would just recommend that we get into one of these topics and then kind of, make the call as we go, rather.
Okay.
We may not need to have follow-up, or we may, but we may not know that until we're well into it.
Right.
May I say something?
By all means.
We need to understand that we were selected for a reason. Everybody brings a gift to this table, that we all have communications outside of this room that will help us to make decisions. We cannot be afraid to start with the hard stuff, and we start with the rate design. Like he said, let's get into it, and then we can work it. It doesn't have to be solved in 2 months, because this is a long-range committee. But
Okay.
let's get to work.
And I think also what you have here, and I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. You have a group of folk here that want to work. We're here for a reason. And meeting every month personally does not bother me, because I like to get stuff done. And if you start having breaks in between, you lose momentum. And now you're trying to come up with a subcommittee, or who's going to have this action item, or who's going to do that. I believe personally you end up with too many moving parts.
Right.
And you end up getting nothing done, or it takes forever to get it done. But if we meet every month and the committee decides that we don't need to meet next month, then we come up with that decision. I think we're getting too far ahead of ourselves, anticipating way down here, but just meet every month and see if we need to have those follow-on type meetings. But we got to start somewhere.
Okay. So we have a move to, basically we have every month and every 2 months, we're going to have to, I guess we could vote. It's pretty hard, and we're probably not going to come to a consensus of 6 weeks, so you have to make a decision. Yeah, Terry?
I was just going to go on what he said. I was just looking at the list, and, meeting every 2 months, it's going to take a long time to get down
Right.
the list. So.
Good point. Okay, seems like we're starting to ease into and toward every month. Dr. Scheib, do you? Easy like Sunday morning, okay. I think I heard a song about that one.
If the committee wants to take a month off, we can say, let's take a month off, but let's keep the cadence regular, and let's make
Right.
that the exception as opposed to locking it in.
I will say that if we're going to meet in September, we'll have to make it a different week if you want me to be up here, because that's the 1 week based on our previous schedule, I've scheduled to be out of town. So I'm sure we can make that happen. So every month, so then we're starting on rate design. We got to decide somehow how we go after that, to your point. I mean, that's very complicated. So what would be the most effective way for the panel in beginning this? And we're not cutting anything off at this point, or any possibility, but in starting this, what's the best way to get to the contours of rate design? What would you want to know as basis material, or do you want, are we ready for a catalog of major points of alternative approaches? Or are we ready to just start with a little more dig into what the implications of the present design are, and as a basis for starting, or where would we begin that? What kind of materials would you like to have, and what kind of discussion for that first meeting?
I think you need to start with what constraints KUB has now with TVA, so that we know to start with what we have now, what the constraints are, and then we can go from there.
And I'll back it up even one step beyond, like, just what are the current rates, and what's
Exactly.
the history of those rates? I mean, in all 4 utilities, tracking, just that 101 of what like what are the rates and what have they been? Yeah.
Well, how about, so step one on this journey, it sounds like, and Elba, I appreciate your putting this up there, would be what are the rates, maybe, and why, and how? And how are they, and then how are they presently constrained? And I think at some point, we're probably going to want to get a little beyond the present constraints and talk, because they don't necessarily have to be there forever. I mean, anything could change, but if they're constrained, are they constrained by what? TVA, who knows? State constitution, I don't know. But does that sound like a good place to start? And who can we, for that, it would seem like we would rely on KUB staff to start that.
Is that something that we can gather through September and not have a meeting in September because we need the information to gather and continue with our meeting in October, having had a month to examine the information that is gathered for us?
Right. So then
Instead of, we need this information. We need to gather it, we need to assimilate it. So why would we meet in September? Give us the information, give us the month of September to evaluate it and continue with our meeting as scheduled for October. Instead of trying to rush and have a meeting in September when we haven't got any of this information yet.
Yeah, I would, sorry, you go ahead.
Would that information come to us via email or a video, or would it be presented? Like, we would maybe have a presentation in September?
Well, I would like to get all the information, because what they just named is a whole bunch of stuff. I need to be able to look at it, read it, assimilate it, so that when we come together in October, we can then come with our questions, and then we can go from there. As you said, we got to get the information together, but just to say, okay, and we're already into August, we're going to the second week of August, we need time to look at this information.
Well, how about,
how would you?
I'm throwing out, I think, to follow up what you're saying, let's plan on monthly, if that's where we want to go, but starting in October.
Yes.
And since this is such a big starting point, we'll use September to either start collecting and B, deciding what we need following that, because
they gave some really good
Right,
ideas of what we need.
right, I do think, to me, overall, this is the way my mind works, I don't want to impose it on anybody else, is we get some basics, what it is, what are the constraints, going to what are alternatives. And that's, then we start talking about that. Yes, sir.
That's fine. I think that KUB should, either present that information to us in October or provide it to us in some sort of format in September. I'm fine with that. I would suggest that maybe some member of the panel come forward with some suggestions on maybe some alternative issue sets around rate design and other things like that at the same meeting, because again, KUB has its current set of rate design, and it's got its sort of constraints, however you want to define those. And then I think that my sense is, from just talking to some members of the panel, that there may be some ideas on alternative rate designs that we ought to at least try to surface at the same meeting, so that the follow-on meeting may be to start to
Flesh those out a little bit?
Yeah, flesh those out, and also see whether there's any flexibility based on those constraints or not constraints to start to accommodate or explore certain things. And it might be good to try to surface some of those things, not as an exhaustive list, but as a first pass, so that it starts to give feedback to KUB and the other panel members of what is in the universe that we may want to think about.
Okay.
Otherwise, that first meeting we just get sort of talked to, and we get to ask a few questions, but we're not actually elevating maybe some of the rate issues that will naturally sort of flow from that. We ought to try to get those at least on the table at the first meeting, or some subset.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I guess that would mean a couple of panel volunteers to take that on.
I'd be happy to work with anybody that is interested in working on these things, and we can just have a quick chat about it. I think everybody's got a few ideas about this, but we ought to try to shape those up and then project them into the group.
Erin?
So, Dr. Smith, I think if I can iterate on this point, I guess my thought would be really understanding the current system is going to be foundational to any type of productive discussion. What's the current system to know whether we like it? And so, to me, there's a step that I see between that 101 KUB-driven overview and what you're discussing with alternatives, which is to say, what does this group see as working or not working with the current system, perhaps informed by some of that background knowledge that could be shared, to your point, maybe via homework of like, here's some things to think about. But I want to just maybe encourage us to take time to discuss this as a group to say, let's reflect on what we just heard from KUB and what we know about our community. What are the needs and challenges, so that instead of putting the solution before the problem, that we spend some time as a group really discussing what we just learned from that current system and then evaluating what are the implications of that, so that that then can inform what types of alternatives do we then need to come back and ask about and talk about and explore at our next meeting, perhaps. I just want to make sure we don't skip that step of like reflecting our experiences with the current system, good and bad.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I absolutely believe that KUB should have a set amount of time to present. We ought to dialogue about what we've heard, and then I think if there is some time set aside to basically bring up some issues that then can start to potentially inform, maybe there's not any issues, I don't know. But I think we ought to, in the spirit of trying to have the committee be able to bring forth some discussion on some of these things, I think we need to create that space. So I don't think we should be precluded from bringing some stuff up. I'm not saying that we bring that up to try to resolve it at that meeting, because that meeting is going to be focused on current rate design, clarifying and understanding. But it can help begin to paint a picture of what else is out there in the universe of how utilities potentially approach rate design that we may then want to follow up on later. Otherwise, our universe is somewhat constrained just by what we heard. And so I think we ought to at least be open to hearing what are some other opportunities, possibilities.
And I see what you're saying, Doc, and that's a really good idea, but I understand what she is saying. We take the information we get in September, and we observe it. That's what we deal with in October. We got November, we're going to deal with your alternatives. Let's start learning about the alternatives. We deal with that in December, because we're putting the cart before the horse. We have got to build a foundation. That's what we're here for. This is not a committee that's going to be over in a year. And so what I'm saying is, both of you are making good points. We need to study. We need to know what we're dealing with. We can still be gathering information about but we can't muddy the water. That one meeting we're getting ready to have is, we need to understand what's going on. And then we need to come back together. Okay, what else is out there? Because you might have something. In the meantime, he's done got out here with the community of something in California. Then we got stuff we can bring back together. But I'm just saying that I would think that October meeting is the foundation that we learn. December is all the alternatives, because there's a lot of alternatives out there. We want to bring forth the absolute best that we can give for our community.
Very good. Any other thoughts on this?
The only thing I'll add,
Right.
I've had the privilege of going on the tour of some of our infrastructure systems, and Dr. Ledford, I know they're your neighbors over there at UT, so you've probably seen this too, but when I think about rates, seeing that infrastructure on the ground, it's so enlightening. So I would definitely encourage us, if we're going to dive in October, to really try to get that tour scheduled for all of us in September, because to your point about foundational knowledge, seeing the scale of infrastructure that KUB manages is overwhelming. And so I think that's also a really important thing to come to the table with, as we understand then how do you keep that running.
I agree. We need the foundational piece first.
Okay.
We need the foundation first of how the rate structure works. And I'll be honest with you, if you email that to me and it goes over my head, I'm going to show up with 1,000,001 questions. I'd rather have it presented and ask those questions then. And I think that gets us ahead of the game. Because if you make it too technical, I promise you, I'm gonna figure out a way to bring it back down to 1, 2, 3. It shouldn't be complex. It should be simple. for us to understand and to be able to take it back and sit down and say, here's some recommendations on, you might want to tweak some things here, at least think about it. But we definitely need the foundational piece from KUB to present that to us.
And can I get clarification? Are we talking about rates and fees as opposed to just rates?
I don't know.
Well,
So I
that's a
assume,
good-
I
good
mean,
point,
I would
yeah.
like for us to have both rates and fees as part of the topic because they're what people write the check for on their bill.
Well, they should go together, right?
Okay, okay, but,
Yeah, I think both.
but there is, again, this is a term of art. There is a difference between a fee and a rate, and so we need to make sure that we want both included.
Well, let me, okay, you bring up an interesting issue. And if I can ask this question. In your rate structure, is your fee part of your rate structure? Because that's what comes out at the end, right? Okay.
So we're
then-
talking about both, and we're talking about
Yeah.
fixed fees and variable, whatever they
that's-
might be.
that's all
That's
in there
all
together.
in our discussion topic, not,
If
yeah.
I may,
Yeah,
to your point that all of us have communities behind us, and look at, like, the rate structure, that's the most popular thing that we all feel that we need to discuss. So I think the communities behind us want us to discuss what they're paying for and how they pay for it and how that's built up and decided. They want us to understand it and they want us to question it. And I think we need to do all of that. So I have no objection to really, actually, anything that I'm hearing from anybody. I think it's all right. Getting the foundation first, I don't mind. But we need to keep our purpose in mind.
Yes.
We've been asked to donate our time
Yes.
to help the people that are behind us, A, understand the rates, and C, and B, ask, well, can we change them for the better?
Right.
And what do people want?
Right.
Well, I think also.
That's the point of it all, so.
There-
if we
there
can
is a
structure it
point-
To deal with that, then that's what we should do.
Well, I think this is coming into focus
Yeah,
somewhat, that
I
we
do
definitely
too.
get the what is, working on a community-driven alternatives piece that's not talk to part, that's panel-driven. And that, I think one piece, though, prior in there somewhere is talking about what values are going to drive all of these. I mean, you know, because when you're talking with a couple of people said, well, what needs to be fixed? Well, what needs to be fixed depends on a whole lot of fundamental values that we bring to the table and what there's a lot of ought tos and what a rate structure ought to be and how it should be designed that probably ought to be made fairly explicit in our discussion before saying, well, here's alternative B. Well, why, to what end, what's it fixing as opposed to alternative C? What value is it maximizing? Or what is the issue, what value what are the unintended consequences for this value of the present system? I mean, what are things that are happening that aren't intended but that are real consequences that would drive some of these alternatives? So somewhere in between the what is and alternatives, we really are going to have to, and maybe it's all mixed together, but we're going to have some discussion of some value statements about what we want to maximize by having whatever a good rate structure means. Yeah, that I think just so we're always conscious of that, because I think there are a lot of people with very varying values for that are at the table, and we want those to be able to be articulated and fit into to help make
Bill-
sense of this.
Bill, a
Yes.
quick question. Are, just sort of taking the pulse of the panel, I assume that all of us want to be exposed to all the different rate classes, industrial, commercial, residential, but I imagine that most of the discussion is going to center around residential, or do we want to have all three dealt with the same level of depth and intensity? Because you start getting demand charges, you start getting into industrial incentive rates and all these other kind of things, and so I'm
Right.
asking maybe to help KUB sharpen their focus on what they're delivering, but you can quickly start getting into a lot of different topics and incentives and other things like that we need to be clear on what we're asking for.
Yeah, I think they've got to do all of them to some point, maybe one more detailed than the other, because you're not going to get the whole picture unless you talk about all of them.
Right.
I mean, they all work together. I mean,
That's true, and different parts of the city sit behind different people. We have Mr. Odom from the Chamber of Commerce and might be very interested in industrial and commercial rates and a discussion of them, so.
Right. I always thought it meant
Question?
all of them. That seems to be what everybody wants, that we may end up going in more depth to some as we get into it further, but at the beginning, the entire rate picture includes all.
Well, I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think we should decide at this meeting
Yeah.
to exclude anything.
Right, okay, fair enough.
Are we asking the right question, KUB? Are we asking the right question for rate design? What goes in there? I mean, it's not something that we're asking that is this huge mountain, and you gotta go back and figure out how to bring it down, but this is something you do every day. So I just wanna make sure we're asking the right question.
And I think some of the foundational work, going back to something Aaron raised, is all of this is because there are costs associated with delivering, you know, the product, the power, cleaning, the treatment of sewage, all the things that KUB does throughout there. We're going to start with, there are a whole bunch of fundamental costs that have to be met, and how do we meet those? And that's what the rate structure gets at, according to what values we have, in ways that are most fair and deliver equity, all the values that we want to bring to the table.
As long as we keep the KISS method and understand that we are dealing with John Q. Public, and anything you be able to write up here, you need to be able to focus it down here. We can go back and we can explain to people, you
Yes.
know.
Yes.
Let's take out the fluff.
Well, part of this panel is bi-directional. I mean, we want to hear from the public and be able to take back to the public as well, which we really appreciate, especially you, Vivian, all you've done on that. But all of us have an opportunity, in fact, an obligation to do both of those. So here's what I've heard. Rate structures first. This is big. We're not going to constrain it to one meeting. We're not sure how many meetings it will take. But where we're going to begin is with the fundamentals of what the structure is now and why, and then have some of the constraints, present constraints, on what that structure can be. We will segue from that into alternatives that are out there to make sure that these alternatives, of which there are many, right? Many approaches are aired, so we can get a full understanding of what some other ways to structure this entire topic could be. Is that pretty much what seems to be good? So that will be what we'll start with next time.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure. Sorry to leave. I don't want to leave
No,
you out.
it's okay. I'm trying to just to ask the panel. All four utilities. One utility. I mean, I don't. To Stephen's point, I don't want to make this too complicated. At the same time, I want to make sure we answer your questions. So, one utility, four utilities, three. You know, and we are in commercial, industrial, residential. I mean, just asking that. That's all I need. I will shut up. Let y'all answer.
No, that's a pretty darn critical point. So well, we're not just talking electricity then, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Because, yeah, I mean, everybody's paying for, look at your bill, everybody's paying for, you know, for things, for a variety of waste, you know, everything including wastewater, water and wastewater, electric, gas, in the future broadband, you know, all of those are going to be out there. So those will all be included in where we present. Pardon me? Fair enough. Okay. Well, let's see. We've got how often we want to meet. We're going to wait. We're going to get information. Do be working and getting information to you prior to October. But to your point, Tiki, we're going to have this. Not when we come. We're not going to have it dependent on your having had a lesson that we've all mastered before we come. The presentation will speak for itself as well, but be informed with some of the prior materials. And meanwhile, you can start meeting along whoever wants to work with Steve, and I think Ken had said, in helping us structure alternatives. Terry wants to be on that too? That'd be great.
Committee.
And just to be clear, are we going to get the PowerPoint in advance of the meeting, and then y'all will present it to us, and we'll have a chance to look at it and come prepared, or are we going to, is it just going to show up the day we show up, and then we're going to have to kind of respond to it in real time? I think it'd be
assume
great to
you'd want
get
it
it
in
a little in advance. I mean, I agree with Tiki that I want to be able to have the dialogue,
Okay.
but it would also be great to see what y'all are presenting and let us, focus on it a little bit. I think we'll come better prepared to be able to ask really good questions and be able to engage the material.
When would you ideally?
Look at the panel here, y'all
Yeah.
tell me.
When
So,
would you like the PowerPoint, the panel? If it's in, a few days in advance, or right at the meeting, or what would be helpful?
Even a few days would be great.
2 weeks
Few
would be,
days.
2 weeks would be ideal. It's going to be a lot of information.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's,
Because then conversations about it can be had.
right.
Then, I get I think of my best questions in my sleep. So, I have to.
Well, bring a pillow next time.
Well, thanks,
Okay.
There's room for
And
it.
it'll probably help you fall asleep.
Okay, we'll shoot for getting the PowerPoint out is a few days minimum and week or two ideally.
Right.
That will be the goal.
That's great.
And we'll,
So if our
Good.
meeting's October 7th, the very latest we would have it is what, the 4th?
PowerPoint went out with the agenda, that'd be a week. We'll encourage everybody to get it as soon as possible, but by minimum, a few days and hopefully a week in advance. So, and then to your point, take it, share it with people. I mean, get whatever you want to do to have this again be a bi-directional flow of information and ideas. Mm-hmm. September. Yes, September tour. Is that something then we could count on? And how will we go about arranging that, Elba?
What I can do is I can send some tentative dates. We'll stick to the proposed, which is during the work week, and we'll keep it at around 4 hours, and send some options for people to consider and see where we can get the most attendance.
What are we touring exactly?
We want you all to have an opportunity to take a look at the areas of our different distributions from our electric system, our gas system, our water, wastewater system. I'll defer over to our senior VP of construction.
John?
I think we could make it what you want it to be, but in past tours we've done with other groups, we've gone to the electric substation, we get power from TVA and also show the distribution side of our substation. We can show where we receive gas at an endpoint, at a regulator station. We've seen, obviously, our water plant is pretty impressive and worthwhile and kind of central for our water system. And then we usually go to like a KUB wastewater treatment plant that's there near Gary over there at UT to kind of show the scale of the wastewater system and how that system works in general. It's not a complete tour of each facility, it's more of just a kind of point and look kind of tour. We've also in the past, looked at our call center, our operations center, places like that. I think we just have to be mindful of where we're at with COVID at the time and those little things as far as the indoor stuff. But we can certainly tour areas that you all would want to see. I think the infrastructure is the part that sort of kind of helps put things into perspective with how the systems work. But we're pretty open.
I'll add as well that water quality is one of your elements as well. We have a lab, and it's usually part of the tour that we usually present. And it is, stop by, quick, see, go on to the next item.
Okay. So Elba's going to send out some dates and start getting a tour scheduled in September.
Yeah, in previous times, we've offered 2 dates. That way, there's more flexibility for people if they can't all meet on one date.
Okay? Well, this was very good discussion. I think we've got a roadmap started, at least the beginning of the long march, not to bring up Chairman Mao or anything. I think we can do a little better than that, but I think this march is going to begin in October, and I think it's going to be a very productive set of discussions. So I think at this point, Jamie, I believe it's time for you to update us on the broadband.
Good evening. How are y'all?
Good.
Just want to give you an opportunity to kind of hear where we've been and where we're going, and I'm going to put you to work because I've already got a couple questions that we do want to seek your all's feedback and input and be sure that we're kind of heading down the right path here. So kind of where we've been to date, obviously we talked to this body in February. That was one of the first things that you all wanted to talk about. Gave you a little bit of background of where we were at. We submitted our plans to the comptroller and TVA in early spring there, kind of coming into March. We had regulatory approval from our board in May. We had a couple public hearings. I really appreciate those of you all who were able to attend that. Really appreciated your participation and hearing from the community about that. And then we went through those final approvals that, again, many of you all were able to view and be with us at. Our board gave us notice to request City Council there in June, and then we were very, very pleased in late June that City Council was able to authorize us getting into the business. So where we're headed next is we've created the vision, and as Gabe said after that meeting, the work starts now. So we've been very busy trying to lay out some of our initial plans. What that looks like, just as a reminder, it's about 5,000 miles of distribution fiber as we go all the way down to a street level. We anticipate that being a 7-year build out, so we got to get started so we can start getting customers hooked onto that. It's about $700 million in capital, and we've talked about that's with our electric system because this is electric infrastructure that will support our utility operations and a lot of what we hope to be some of our new smart grid infrastructure, primarily smart switches to support reliability. We're really excited about that. Some of that infrastructure has already proven results on our system today, and we're excited about expanding that system-wide. But we've got to pay for that, as we've discussed with this body. And again, next board actions will be this coming month, with rate increases to be presented in August and then a second reading in September, with an amended budget for both the fiber, or creation, I should say, of a budget for the fiber division, along with amended budget for the electric division in August. And so we've started thinking about and getting ready and thinking about hiring folks and where we're going to go with this. That's the number one question we get asked these days is, well, when are you going to hook me up? And which neighborhoods are you going to first? And that's one of the things we'd like to talk to you about tonight. And as well as we had committed, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
One, why, was there ever a discussion of floating bonds to cover some of these expenses?
Oh, we will be floating bonds for sure. We just couldn't.
So I didn't see that on there. So
okay.
A portion of this is going to be covered. And then two, are you guys starting to get visibility on the federal infrastructure plan? And is there a possibility that some of that could actually lower some of these?
Absolutely. Two of our staff members were at the governor's conference today hearing about that detail. Okay. We're really excited, think we're really positioned very well. The way I look at it is we're exactly where Chattanooga was when the stimulus funds of 2008 came out. And so we're really excited about that. We're crossing our fingers. The state of Tennessee actually has taken some really bold action in the last 2 or 3 months. It went from $200 million to $400 million today. It was announced to be $500 million in broadband expansion for across the state. A lot of that's targeted to rural. And so the notion is we're looking for the final rule to come out on those grants to see this notion between unserved and underserved. And I like seeing that those two terms are starting to kind of come to the table for discussion, because those are very different. And that's actually, we'll talk a little bit about that, about deployment. And I apologize for talking about the whole financing plan there, but yes, okay. we can't put it all on the backs of our ratepayers today, and we can't borrow our way and pay for it totally with bonds as well too. So thank you, Dr. Smith, for pointing that out.
Right. And one other question.
Yes, sir.
And I know this, you got to base your rate action in August, except you got to base it on something. There's some assumptions in there somewhere.
Yes, sir.
So can you tell us what your assumption is on the average rate increase?
You're setting me up for my next slide here in a second. Okay. Let me mention, too, that the other thing that we committed to with the City of Knoxville, with Ms. Gill and her staff's assistance and then the mayor's support, is the creation of a low-income program for internet. And we want to talk to you a little bit about that tonight. But because we've been getting a lot of questions from folks that you all represent, as well as just from our own community, we want to touch on the rates, and so I'll talk about that average impact. You'll see it right there again. You'll see the forecast in the timeline. There, we didn't raise any rates in 2020 or 2021, and what we've talked about, and this is for everything that KUB would need for both our Century 2 plans, as well as the enhanced grid modernization that would support broadband, is 3% rate increases on average for our consumers. How that impacts KUB's average customer, and you can see it up there at the top, for our existing rate increases that we had in the plan, it's about $7.20 a month at full implementation of the rate increases. So by the time that third rate increase is put in 2024, our average customer will pay $7.20 more for our existing Century 2, and for this additional spend for the fiber network will be $3.60. So roughly getting to that $10 average-ish type impact. Again, it's all on the energy charge. So if I use more, I pay more. I run my numbers, it's going to be more than $10 a month at my house. For those that use less, it'll be less.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, yeah, this is great.
So you're going to present this August, September. And right now, you don't know about your bond situation. You don't know about this other money that may come in from the federal government for infrastructure. So are you going to go back and adjust these numbers?
Absolutely. If we were to
I
get,
just got to ask that question.
no, and I'm glad you are. This is great information. This is what, no, if we were to be able to get, let's say, a Chattanooga level type grant, they got over $100 million. It very well could, it will impact these rates. Okay. It might eliminate one of those rate increases. This is to build it without any consideration of grant dollars. Absolutely.
Okay.
Have you done analysis based on this roughly $10 at the 2024 level, where somebody is currently getting internet from somewhere else, and the delta between the reduction that they're going to experience by getting municipal broadband versus whatever? Because I think that that's got to be communicated to the public, that there's going to be a fairly significant savings that will probably offset and even, now I'm not saying it's going to apply to everybody because some people don't have it, but we need to at least have that in the dialogue, because I'm not sure people are going to immediately understand that you're going to get a higher quality service for less money.
As we were talking to our board, city council, at our public meetings, that was really a centerpiece there. Yeah. It's kind of a, I won't say moving target, because each of us have different packages, but we presented prospective packages that Comcast, AT&T, and others have. When I've talked to folks, I always talk about what I have. And so even in my case, where I may pay more than that $10 a month, there's still a good wallet impact there based upon our entry level of our $65 a month package. Just, you know, raw cost, I'm paying $86 right now to Comcast for internet only, and I would get, in theory, a better package from KUB as well. So again, a lot of this was meant just to be reviewed to get to really what I want to talk about tonight, but absolutely, that was a lot of the feedback we got. Well, you know, it's kind of what's my wallet impact in that particular regard, and that's really consistent. I think we had a bogey, if I remember the slide from the presentations, it could be somewhere between $13 and $55, depending upon what kind of package you have. There's virtually no package that's offered by current providers that you wouldn't save some in many, many cases. So in that regard. So great questions. I will say a lot of folks are saying, so you're raising our rates to just do the fiber network, or is it 3% or is it 6%? I want to be sure that we all understand, and you all can help us get that word out and bring questions back to us as we do try to articulate the benefits, is to understand it's 3% rate increases. Part of that was already in our existing 10-year plan. We had it stretched out over a few more years. So what have we done? We've added some more dollars in there that need to be paid for by rates. We've added a little bit additional rates, and we brought it a little bit sooner in the forecast. And so that's what we've done in that particular regard. Excuse me. So where are we going? And this is part of one of the things that we would really like your impact to be sure, or input rather, to be sure we're on the right track. We've kind of used this notion we'd have a balanced scorecard as we look and try to lay out our deployment plans. And really there, I'll call it kind of the three legs of the stool. First, we're going to look at constructability. As I've talked to this group before, and you've probably heard me speak on this, we already have fiber out in our system today. We've been building for about 5 years now. We have about 150 miles connecting our substations at full build out. That'd be about 300 miles that would connect our substations to support our utility operations. But obviously, as we build this out into the neighborhoods, we're going to go where we've got that today. So that's one leg of the criteria. It's for utility benefit. Electric division is paying for this, the fiber division will pay its fair share, but we have utility needs for this to support grid modernization. And again, primary function right out the gate that we know we want to invest in are these switches for reliability. And so that's one, and we know where those poor performing electric circuits are. But also, as you recall, and you've heard our board chair speak to this and commit to this, you've heard Gabe talk about this as well too. Part of this is to help serve both groups that I just mentioned, underserved and unserved folks. And so one of the questions we try to draw a correlation to is that in many cases the current existing model for the for-profit entities means density equals I'm going to be there. So a lot of customers to recoup my costs from, that's where that service is going to be provided. So one correlation we're trying to make is low density areas equal underserved or unserved in many cases. So think about the folks that we've heard from Union County, Granger County, deep rural areas in which there's not that density to really provide that payback model for the private entity. So we've kind of got a beat on that. You've already mentioned the grants that are being brought out. That's a real focus of our federal and both state administrations trying to reach those folks that are unserved. But we've also heard voice from many of you and other members in our community about the notion of underserved, meaning they live in a high density area, literally within the beltway of Knoxville, but they are that 1 mile from the last tap, or it didn't bring it into their housing development, or that the product that is offered to them is not really up to standard of what folks need for today for high-speed internet. So our question to you today is where do you see that in the Knoxville service territory? Where do you see underserved in your particular community? When we start talking about areas of town, help us understand where you see or what you think in that regard. And in many cases, I know I've had conversations with some of you about where we see that, but really wanted to hear from your perspective, what are you all hearing in that particular regard? And obviously I'm putting you on the spot, and here in a minute my email address is going to be on the screen. I'd love to hear feedback. So if you want to offer up something tonight, it's great. I think that's what this panel's here for, is to discuss things like that. But at the same point in time, I know that don't want to necessarily put you on the spot in that regard.
I got no problem being on the spot.
I know that
So,
you do.
I know you're talking about going to the substations. You're going to shoot out from the substations first, right? So I got a good understanding of that. Now, we got this downtown area where everything in downtown with the walkability and the bikeability, you got that circle that everything is obviously always taken care of. Right outside that boundary, when you go up Summit Hill and you go up that hill, if you go up there, you go to the areas that we're calling urban removal. Okay, we're talking about these areas that have a food desert, these areas that need help. Is there a way that you're going to be able to create, like I want to call it a electronic grid map? I want to see where you're going to go first. Can you not hit those areas? Can you go into North Knoxville? What is your capability, the capacity to go more than one place at a time? So what is the game plan that those areas that are really hurting and have been, let's put some attention on them. Can you do that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think, we'll pass probably, let's just say 20,000 customers that first year. And as long as we set a constructability plan, it's all connected, in theory, we can go where we want to go. I can't start where I don't have that leg to grow to, but knowing that, again, we've really done a good job of connecting, we'll call the interstate. I've just got to kind of know which off-ramp to hit and start hitting those neighborhoods. And then you just go down the street. We will build substation by substation just because that's the way it's connected. But even if, a lot of folks don't know substations, but, to your point, you're starting to talk to me about neighborhoods. A lot of times when I get into this discussion, people say, well, let's talk about what schools are in those particular areas. If that's easier to say rather than a large area like Fountain City, is there a particular area like near Gresham Middle or near Fulton High School? Are there areas of your all's neighbors and families and friends that we're talking about? You started hitting on some of those neighborhoods. It sounds like up, honestly, more of the Austin East, Fulton High School. Am I kind of am I missing
it's
the neighborhood?
It's not just Austin East and Fulton. We're talking about South Knox. We're talking about going across the bridge.
Okay.
We're talking about going on the other side. Can we get a picture of where are all the substations? Is there a map?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
So that we can see where, because we know that whoever's living around those substations is going to get fiber.
Right.
Because it just makes sense. You start where you are.
Right.
Now you say there's a short part, there's a leg. Okay, so what do we do to extend that leg? How do we put a brace on it so we reach on now?
Right.
What do we do? But we need to, I want to see the substations.
Okay.
Where are the substations that will be affected first?
Okay. Well, I guess the input I'm asking for, and we'll definitely get that to you. it's stuff we don't show up on public because it's kind of national security type stuff, but I can show you. Now, but at the end of the day, more so.
Transparency, brother.
At the end of the day, I just, more so the communities that if there's any particular, I've had some folks call us and say, there are pockets of the Carter community, for instance, that seem to be very underserved. It comes as somewhat of a surprise to us, but just want to know if even anecdotally you all knew some of those things. But no, once we start to firm up those plans, working with our board, working with you all, we'll definitely look at a more granular view of that particular lens.
So you say there's both the build out associated with the substations, but then there's also the current fiber network that you extend off of. I know that there are some areas where, like, even AT&T wasn't offering fiber optic type of services and stuff like that. So when you're sharing the substation, can you share the current fiber pattern? Because I know, like, I've wanted fiber for a long time, and can't get it.
Right.
So it's just, and I was always critical of AT&T and stuff like that, but they just never would do it.
Right.
So
not an untypical deal, but if indeed there was an area, let's just use our Mohawk substation that it's called. It's near the water plant. It's one that serves the water plant. If we knew in the 5 Points area that was a neighborhood that, again, through your all's knowledge base, then we could start out of that substation and just kind of spider from there, if you will, coming off of those circuits that are in that subdivision, or if it's our Arlington substation, or if it's I live off Dry Gap substation. That was just more so neighborhoods, communities that are, if it was more of a wide swath as opposed to a very specific situation. And we're pretty close to most of our substations right now, so I won't say that it's a large, especially for, I think, Dr. Shipe, you talked about more side what I'll call inside the beltway of Knoxville. We've kind of spoken wheeled that, I'm not at maybe Maynardville substation just yet, but I'm at most of our city substations in that particular.
Is there a way to use the census information that would help you to understand?
We started looking at that information too. We know, again, to the degree the federal maps and the census maps are correct, we start to correlate some information there, but you'll see both with the Biden administration and then with Governor Lee's administration, both are putting significant dollars towards getting those maps better. And so that information is dated and suspect at best, especially at the federal level. The
I know
census
there's an
data
office
starts
at the
to.
University of Tennessee, there's a specific office
Yeah, the
that
Boyd
can
Center
give you
for
the top of
Research,
the
yeah.
line information that
Absolutely.
you need. So I think that
No,
would help.
there's some good zip code data that talks about if they reported, if they have broadband or service or not. So we've got some good zip code level data that says, 98% of the respondees in this zip code have broadband service, and then this 98, and 15% of the respondees in this zip code. So again, using sources of data like that, using what the E-Task Force with the school system did, we know where those kids that, like, at a high level, we know sort of where those kids that got free service are, and it's just trying to triangulate these pieces of information, and just wanted to use you all as another piece of that particular information. So.
The business mind part of me, I want to tell you, I would take a look at your competitors, because they're probably going to cost the folks more money. You can go into those areas and offer folks a lower rate. You get them out of there. There'll probably be some high interest areas for you.
Yes, sir.
They said we can get rid of this high bill and go with KUB if you all offer the service to them. That's just
the data shows that the competitor's response is in any market, whether you're selling pencils or broadband, is as soon as somebody offers a lower price,
yeah.
those prices start coming down as well too, and that ultimately benefits all of our consumers anyway. Competition usually ends up being good, is what we've heard in other particular markets. So yes, absolutely.
Do you have a way for people to self-report other than like sending you an email?
Not at this particular point in time, and part of it is that with such an effort to build it out, I think what I would submit to you is that there's no one area that's worse off than another, except for I think we can demonstrate, again, even actually through some of those FCC maps, that some of our rural areas are truly underserved, or unserved, let me say, not even underserved. And then you have pockets, I like the term of desert, there's almost like a digital desert in some of the places locally. So that would be probably more helpful if folks were to say, I have no service, or I have service that's we already hear from a lot of folks that say my service is no good. So if we use that as a criteria, we'd be having to go everywhere. So, or, you know, a lot of places. And I'm not speaking ill of current providers. I just think that's what folks want to self-report in that particular regard.
Did you say, I'm sorry, did you say that you looked at school systems? Because I know when they went on this COVID lockdown and they forced people home and they needed internet.
We kind of know how many kids didn't have a fixed wired service, just at a global level. It's hard due to privacy rules to know exactly like addresses. And so I think we're trying to, again, at a high level, try to, again, kind of get a feel for what schools maybe were impacted more than others. I would submit to you that what we kind of got anecdotally, again, Carter Community, Central, Austin East, Fulton seem to be impacted more than others. And so, you know, if we start talking about, from our perspective, of what I'll call that underserved community, that would be where I think we start looking at, you know, at in many cases first. I do think South, we hear a lot of feedback about South. Of course, we serve Seymour. Seymour seems to have some options. But as you even start moving east towards Sevier County a little bit, there's, again, that once that density disappears, the opportunities for great service kind of disappear as well too. And that's everywhere. And that's, again, Union County, Granger County, others that we serve. We've heard from both mayors there. For those of you who are plugged in, you know, Mayor Byrd, Mayor Bailey, very vocal about the need for that in their community. So we're very well aware of there too. There's just a lot of needs. And honestly, trying to meet the needs and balance it is, it's not an exact science, it's a little bit of an art, and we're just trying to honestly solve a complex problem that's existed for quite some time.
Thank you. I mean, you're really raising an interesting question. I don't really have anything to report from my area in terms of, like, except my own family who say that the broadband sucks, but I think that you're kind of barking up an interesting tree when you're talking about schools, because one of the big comments that I heard during the sessions was this is a benefit to education.
Yeah.
This will let us improve educational outcomes, which we need to do.
Yes.
And so what about just going through the schools and doing surveys, getting teachers to do surveys of their students? How's the broadband in your area? Where, you know, and maybe that would help kind of make a map of the need.
Yeah.
And would let you go ahead and start prioritizing underserved areas.
Yeah. No, I think that we're getting good data like that. Like I was saying, as we've gotten some high level data, and part of this was, again, just not even independently of that information in which we've kind of talked to them is just you as community representatives, kind of layering on top of that as well too. You all are plugged into your community. We just want to be sure we were hearing from you all.
A quick question. 100% supportive of all the low service areas. Are y'all at all open for neighborhood groups to canvass their area and then come back to you with, we have X percentage of our neighborhood group that would actually be ready to sign up with this particular service over whatever, as a way to know? Because as you go into areas, obviously, the more people that sign up, the faster you get payback, and the faster you start making,
Right.
you know, your sort of return on it. And so, if there are neighborhood groups that are organized at that level that are willing to do that, would you all be responsive to that?
I think we're open to anything in this regard. The problem is going to be is, you know, as many folks have pointed out, you know, we've kind of been chasing this bus and now we've caught it. And now it's people like, when am I going to get it? I mean, every time, every meeting that I'm in a meeting with folks that aren't KUB folks, they say, you haven't gotten to my house yet, Jamie. And I'm going to hear that for the next 7 years. And so I think what we're starting to see, to all of our points here, is that if we ask that very question, Dr. Smith, we would hear a lot of, our area's ready, our service is adequate, we're ready to go. And so choosing and trying to get community input, we're always open to that. It's just at the end of the day, it's going to be, there appears to be pockets of need everywhere. This fiber becoming a utility And the pandemic has really exacerbated that, has really just taken that need from like, boy, I sure would like to, but I got to have it, to the point about schools. And I think we do focus around education. We focus about, throwing our lifelines to our kids. We've heard recently, if you pay attention to the news, about the learning gaps that have already existed. Unfortunately, you've got what's going on right now. Goodness sakes, let's hope we don't have to roll back and go back to virtual learning and things like that. So we're just trying to hit those that are of most urgent and desperate need the earliest. So, but I do appreciate your feedback, and I know time is of the essence, and I do want to also point out just one thing as I wrap up my comments. And again, I will post my email address. Many of y'all have my contact. Would love to have conversation with you. Love to hear your feedback as things come to mind or as you become aware of things. But we are committed to creating this community low-income plan. Of interest, we're really kind of modeling our concepts to start our discussions around EPB's Ed Connect program. What they have done, and again, that doesn't mean that we will do this. We've already heard from some community leaders, folks that work in this space, experts, and we want your opinion about it too, and this will not be the only time in which we seek your guidance in this regard, is that their program targeted kids on free or reduced lunch, and this is entirely funded by the community. Hamilton County, Chattanooga City, Hamilton County Schools, along with other public-private partnerships, have brought this money to the table for EPB. EPB assists in it, in the administration of it, and obviously they'd already built out their network, so they're in a little bit different spot than we are. They've been in the business 10 years before they rolled out a program like this. KUB and City, for those that saw City Council, we codified our commitment with the city to work with them on this. Good news is we do think, Aaron and I have been talking, that hopefully there are programs both at a state and federal level that also might be grants to support access, not just the infrastructure that we've all talked about, but literal access to that. So somewhere between the funding process and us getting grants, we are committed to finding funds, committed going to the private sector, to companies and individuals that might want to support this, and getting the funds for that. During our talk with council, again, Vice Mayor McKenzie said that definitely this is an area we would like our customers' feedback on, and what do you all think? And so knowing that, again, the need may be great for support in this particular area, it does take funding to support something like that. And so you all giving us feedback about how we would do it, what group should get it. We've already gotten feedback that maybe SNAP benefits are a better litmus test than free or reduced lunch, because it seems like free or reduced lunch now is more of a school-wide thing as opposed to individual thing. Right. SNAP benefits are, you reapply for them annually, so there's a clearinghouse process there. So it's things like that we want your feedback over time to get and understand exactly how you think that the best criteria would go in that particular regard. And if funds are limited and we can't fund everybody that would fit in under one of these criteria, how do we make those tough choices about that criteria? We want to make it as easy as possible to gain access to this service, and we want to serve and make an impact to the most people possible. So we want to work with you as we continue to develop that. But just know that we're committed on working on this. We've begun discussions on that. We're trying to formulate some of that. And we'll, again, we seek your feedback, and we'll bring back our ideas as well as we begin to formulate those. So those are my two topics that I really kind of wanted to lay out to you tonight.
You're the one that just got promoted, right?
Yes, sir. Thank you for y'all's warm response and applause.
You presented very well. You presented very well.
Thank you.
Very well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that.
Very well.
I'm very passionate about this topic. It's been an honor to work on this. I'm very excited about what the next 7 years brings. We really think we can do some great things for Knoxville and our area with this, with our rural communities, with our urban communities. It's transformational, and we're excited about what it'll bring. And excited, and this is where we're excited on the utility side too, but nobody wants to hear about utility geek stuff. But we are excited about some of the tools and that we'll get to use on our systems and help keep your lights on even more. So we're excited about things like that. So, but
how long ago did you get promoted?
Last week.
And then they put you out here in front of all of this, right?
Oh, I've talked to our board for a number of years. I've worked at KUB pushing 23 years, so I've done a lot of different things, and I always like talking to people about KUB stuff. But that's my email address, real simple for y'all to remember. Feel free to email me comments, suggestions, questions. If you have, we're going to be getting out in the community, talking to community groups about this. A lot of folks have had questions. At this point, we don't have a whole lot of answers, so. But we do want to be sure that we're engaging our community, getting their feedback, and being sure we're answering questions as time goes along. Yeah. So again, as you all get questions, feel free to push them right to us, and I know you will. So
yeah, Oh, that's beautiful, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all very much.
I've actually got a little question right now. There's a group called SEED that loves to do surveys.
All right.
And
seed's
if you're looking for granular information about
Okay.
pockets of underserved and unserved areas, that might be a good place
Okay,
to go.
great.
And I communicate regularly with J.D. Jackson. He's on my political team.
Okay.
So I could
Fantastic.
ask him about it and
Very good.
put you guys in touch because they'd probably enjoy working on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jamie. And I know I hear more excitement about broadband than anything on the local scene for a long, long time. So I really appreciate everybody's initiative on this, and obviously KUB's initiative, but all the support. And I know you're going to be coming back to this panel quite a bit, and it's going to be a challenge, but a really great challenge for us to meet. Well, okay, we are up a couple minutes past where our end time is. Does anybody have anything? I think we're pretty well know where we're headed and have our roadmap for the next couple months. We don't have any public forum folks signed up tonight. So is there anything else anybody would like to provide for the good of the order, or should we consider adjourning? Okay, I think silence means adjourning. So consider
Thank you.
ourselves adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Great to see everybody.